If you're on Mac, there's a site called Emacs for OS X, and that's actually the URL as well, emacs for macosx.com, and it's a pretty easy to figure out kind of download. Click the button, downloads, drag it into your applications folder, and then you're sort of ready to go. And if you're on Windows, I have to admit that I've not really ever used Windows. I think I might have used it like twice, maybe thrice in my life. So all I know is that it exists for Windows, that you can download it and install it. And unfortunately, everything I'm talking about here is going to be very specific to either Linux or OS X. So it's not because I don't want to tell you how to do it on Windows, it's because I don't know how. Although if you are on Windows, you should consider Linux, because it's free and it's a really, really powerful operating system. Does a lot of cool stuff. So, and everything you're seeing today is done on Linux. So just check it out, see if you like it, try it out if you want. So anyway, the easiest way to get, once you've gotten OS Emacs on your OS, then you can get the Screenwriter-Mode, and that is done with this button right here, big download button. Click that, save it. Firefox will offer to save it, as usual. You can just save it to your hard drive. And once it's done that, I've already got it on here, so I'm not going to actually do that. But once it is on your hard drive, then you'll want to unzip it, or untar it, as the case actually might be, but it's the same idea. And that will dump this little folder, Screenwriter-Mode, into your onto your hard drive. And in this file, there are a lot of different things that you should look at. So there's a README file, which is actually just the install file. So the install file tells you exactly how you need to install this, and there are some steps to take in order to install it correctly. The reason I do it this way is because there are so many different ways to install it, and I didn't want to impose anything on the person who is going to install it. I didn't want to say, okay, this is what I'm doing to all of your stuff, because that's kind of dangerous. For anyone who doesn't care about this kind of thing, I might try to come up with an easy install fairly soon, so that you don't actually have to even bother reading the install file or anything like that. But until then, you can read the install file. It tells you exactly what you need to do, and it's not really that hard, so let's step through it right now. So the first thing, like I said, is to open up the install file and just kind of read through it. You can skip the preamble, that's all about the licensing and stuff like that, and the license just states, it's the GNU public license, so it just states that it's completely free to use, and that if you ever have any improvements to this, then you can make those improvements and send them back to me, and I'll also send them back to Vance L. Simpson, and everyone wins. So we've done the initial part, which is to download the plugin itself. Emacs plugins end in the extension .el, so screenwriter.el, that's the plugin that we really want. All the rest of this stuff is just kind of extra stuff. This is what we really want. Now it's telling you to make a directory in your home folder called eLisp. eLisp is the language, the programming language that Emacs uses. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a new folder, and I will call it eLisp. And then it's telling me to copy the plugin into my eLisp folder. So I'll do that as well. Let me get another window open here. So I go into Screenwriter-Mode, I find the plugin, there it is, .el, and just drag it right into eLisp. And now there's my plugin right there. Okay, so that was the first thing. It's technically speaking installed. Now we need to configure Emacs so that it actually knows that that thing exists. Easiest way to do that is to open up a word processor. I happen to be using Emacs right now, so I might as well just keep using it. No, I'm not using Emacs right now. I'm using gedit right now. Okay, well, I'll keep using that then. So I get a new document open, and I'm just going to copy all of this stuff into here. This is just telling Emacs to be aware that there's an eLisp folder and to load our little plugin. And I think that's about it. Yeah, that's really about it. So that's not the hardest install ever. It's not a double click this icon and everything magically will install. But you have to admit that as long as you kind of read the installer or just remember what I've told you here, that's not the most complex thing in the world. Like I say, there are a couple of other options, and I put those in .emacs.add. It's a different file. You can add these options to your little configuration file that you're building here, or not. It doesn't really matter. They're really all kind of optional. And that's actually already in it, so yep, we're good. So I'm going to save this as now. Go to File, Save As. And the place you're going to want to save this, again, this applies for sure on Linux and Mac OS X. And I'm not sure how this is done on Windows at all. But you want to save it as in your home directory as .emacs. So period, EMACS, all lowercase. It's got to be called that for Emacs to find it. I'll save it. It says, hey, it already exists. Are you sure you want to do this? Well, in this case, yes, I do. Now, obviously, if you're an Emacs user you probably, is anyone here an Emacs user? Okay, so, if you've got a .emacs file, obviously you wouldn't want to overwrite that probably if you've customized your .emacs file. So you'd simply want to open your .emacs file, add this stuff to it, and then resave it, obviously. Okay. So we've just installed it and we've configured it. So we are really just we're good. We're good to go. I'm going to, I think, close that, and I'm going to launch Emacs. Okay. So now if I invoke Screenplay-Mode, which I have set in the .emacs file to F1, which I don't really know if that's all that proper in Emacs tradition. I might have to change that at some point. But the point being that you can invoke it with either a hotkey that you can define in your .emacs file, or if you hit Alt-X. Alt-X takes you down to this little bar right down here, and this is going to be an important bar, and I don't know, that might be too low on the screen for everyone to see. There. This little tiny bar at the bottom, that's kind of like your command center for Emacs. It's called a mini buffer, if you want to remember that. Alt-X, they denote it to mean MX. Like I said, this is an old program. Before, there was no Alt back then. It was a meta or something like that. So these were different keyboards. We're way back in history here. So Alt-X means run a program, or in this case, run a plugin. And that would be, in this case, Screenwriter-Mode. And then you can always tell what mode you're in because it tells you right here in the gray bar. Screenwriter fill, meaning that mode. So now we're in Screenwriter mode. Really that simple. The one thing that we don't have right now is a blank document. So we're kind of staring at this splash page. We need a blank document. So Emacs is not so different that you can't kind of figure it out. I mean, there are icons right here. This is probably the new file icon, right? Yes, actually it is. Perfect. Or you can go to File. They call it visiting a new file. And we can put it wherever we want. I'm going to put it in my Documents folder. I'm going to create a new folder and I'll call it Screen Demo. And I'm going to call this 01.scp. The reason I'm calling it .scp is because with my version of Screenwriter, I decided that all screenplay documents are going to end in .scp or .screenplay. The way that I do it is I end all of the scenes that I write in .scp, and then when I put all those scenes together into one big screenplay, which is how I like to organize it, because that way I can switch the scenes around, right? So if I wrote scene 1 thinking it was always going to be scene 1, and then I write scene 2 and then 3, and then I realize, oh, I should start with 3 and end on 1, that would be cooler, then I can just renumber the files and they go in that order now, rather than having to find that part in the screenplay and copy and paste it and move everything around. I don't like doing that in this big monolithic file. So I keep them separate into little scenes, and then at the very end I issue a command that makes them all go into one document. And I've got some tools that will help you do that. And if we have time, I'll try to go over those. I don't know if I'll have time though, but they are included with the Screenwriter-Mode download. So we're in a Screenwriter mode right there. Now we need to start putting stuff in. So the way to do that is it centers around the Alt key. There are, like I said, 4 separate kinds of elements in a screenplay, correct? There is a transition, a slug line, an action block, and a dialogue block. So transition is typically first because you start with fade in almost all the time. And so I have mapped that to, or I've assigned that to Alt-T. So if I hit Alt-T and say fade in, then it gives me fade in, as you can see right over there on the right hand side. If I hit return, actually I don't have to hit return, sorry. What I can do now is hit Alt-S for slug line. Now if you notice, when I'm hitting the Alt whatever, so Alt-T for transition, Alt-S for slug line, Alt-A for action, anyone want to hazard a guess as to what dialogue is going to be? Yes, Alt-D for dialogue. So when I hit those, it takes me out of my document, drops me down to my mini buffer, the little control panel, and it tells me what to do, enter scene heading. Okay, well I can do that. I'll put interior presentation night, and it inserts that right up there. Now let's do some action. So Alt-A for action. A presenter, actually, the first time you mention a character, the name is capitalized. Every time after that, there's no need to capitalize the person, but that is what you do the first time they're shown. Presenter talks about GNU emacs. Emacs was put out by a programming collective called GNU. GNU emacs, demonstrating the right way to write a screenplay. Okay, simple enough. Notice I'm not hitting return. I can hit return. It's fine to hit return. I like to not hit return because the next element will fill in the white space for you. You can always add more white space later, but I like to just keep hitting the Alt combination. So let's assume that now we're going to have some dialogue. So Alt-D,